New York, a city of 8.3 million people, a jungle of 32,000 streets, 5 great boroughs, and 3 rivers. A city that never sleeps. But 400 years ago, it did not even exist. This is not just the story of buildings, wealth, and power. It is the story of how a wild land of forests and rivers was transformed into the beating heart of the modern world. Tonight, we uncover the hidden journey of New York, from wilderness to empire to the greatest city on earth. You are watching Mystery in the Dark, the place where history is not just told, it is felt. Stay with us, because the origins of New York hide mysteries you've never imagined. Before New York was steel and concrete, it was a land of endless forests. Thick woods stretched across the horizon, rivers carved their way through valleys, and wild animals roamed freely. For thousands of years, native tribes lived here. The Lenape people, speakers of the Algonquian language, called this land their home. They built villages along the rivers, hunted deer and bear, fished in the Hudson, and planted corn, beans, and squash. To them, this was not New York. It was Lenapehoking, the land of the Lenape. In 1524, the silence of the land was broken. An Italian explorer, Giovanni da Verrazzano, sailed into the great harbor. His ship glided past Staten Island, into the bay that would one day be known as New York Harbor. Verrazzano saw a land rich with life, but he did not stay. His reports went back to Europe, igniting interest in this untouched world. Nearly a century later, in 1609, a new ship cut through the waves. It was the Half Moon, commanded by an Englishman in Dutch service, Henry Hudson. He sailed up the great river that now bears his name, the Hudson River. That single voyage changed everything. It marked the beginning of New York's destiny. The Dutch saw opportunity. By 1625, they built a fort at the southern tip of Manhattan, Fort Amsterdam. Around the fort, houses and shops began to appear. A new settlement was born, New Amsterdam. In 1626, Peter Minuit made a deal that would echo through history. He purchased Manhattan Island from the Lenape people, offering trade goods worth just 60 guilders, about $1,000 today. The Lenape believed they were sharing the land, not selling it forever. But for the Dutch, it was ownership. And with that small transaction, the foundations of one of the world's greatest cities were laid. Life in New Amsterdam was not easy. The settlement was small, surrounded by forests and rivers. Conflicts with native tribes arose, winters were harsh, and survival was uncertain. But trade kept the colony alive. Beaver pelts, highly valued in Europe, became the lifeblood of New Amsterdam. Ships sailed back and forth, carrying fur, timber, and hope. This was just the beginning. But the future of New York was already taking shape. From a land of forests to a fragile Dutch colony, New York had taken its first steps. But soon rival empires would clash, and the destiny of this city would hang in the balance. The Dutch built a fragile settlement called New Amsterdam. From forests and rivers, a colony was born, but destiny had bigger plans. The Dutch were not the only empire with eyes on this land. But the question was, who would truly control this city's future? Soon, English warships would arrive, and history would take a turn that changed New Amsterdam forever. By the 1650s, the Dutch and English were bitter rivals. Across the oceans, they fought for trade, land, and power. In 1664, the conflict reached Manhattan. 4 English warships sailed into the harbor. Their cannons pointed directly at New Amsterdam. The Dutch governor, Peter Stuyvesant, wanted to fight, but his people were tired. The settlement was weak, supplies were low, and the citizens feared destruction. Without a single shot fired, the Dutch surrendered. The English lowered the Dutch flag and raised their own. New Amsterdam was gone. In its place, a new name appeared: New York, named after the Duke of York. Under British rule, New York began to grow. The English expanded the city's trade, built roads, and strengthened the port. Merchants filled the harbor with ships, bringing goods from the Caribbean, Europe, and Africa. But not all trade was free. Slavery grew rapidly, and enslaved Africans were forced to build much of the city. By the 1700s, New York had become a vital hub of the British Empire. But beneath its busy streets, anger was slowly building. Anger that would soon ignite a revolution. In 1765, the British government passed the Stamp Act, a tax on printed materials in the colonies. For New Yorkers, this was the final insult. Merchants, workers, and intellectuals joined together to resist British control. A secret group was formed, the Sons of Liberty. They organized protests in the streets, burned effigies, and vowed that New York would not bow to tyranny. From taverns to printing presses, the voice of revolution began to spread, and soon New York was on fire with rebellion. In 1776, the revolution exploded. George Washington led the Continental Army against the British. One of the first great battles took place here, the Battle of Long Island. Washington's forces were outnumbered and outgunned. The British attacked with brutal strength, and the Americans suffered a crushing defeat. New York fell into British hands, and for the rest of the war, it remained under enemy control. Life in occupied New York was grim. The British used the city as their headquarters. Prison ships anchored in the harbor became floating hells, where thousands of captured patriots suffered and died. Fires destroyed parts of the city, food was scarce, and New Yorkers lived under constant fear. Yet resistance never vanished. Secret networks carried information to Washington's army. Whispers of freedom never stopped. Finally, in 1783, the war ended. The Treaty of Paris declared American independence. On November 25th, British troops left New York, and George Washington entered the city in triumph. Crowds cheered as the American flag was raised. New York was free, and in that moment, it became more than just a city. It became a symbol of the new nation. In 1789, New York reached a new height. It was chosen as the very first capital of the United States. On April 30th, George Washington stood at Federal Hall and took the oath of office as the first president of the United States. For a brief but powerful moment, New York was the beating heart of the newborn nation. Though the capital would later move to Philadelphia and then to Washington, D.C., New York's role in America's birth was forever sealed in history. From Dutch traders to English rulers, from revolution to independence, New York had already witnessed the storms of empire and freedom. But the greatest transformation was yet to come. In the 19th century, waves of immigrants, canals, and industry would turn this city into a world power. But how did a port on the edge of America become the beating heart of the world? The 19th century transformed New York. Ships filled the harbor, bringing goods, wealth, and most importantly, people. Millions of immigrants saw New York as the gateway to America, the first step in their journey toward a new life. In 1825, the opening of the Erie Canal changed everything. The canal connected the Hudson River to the Great Lakes, making New York the center of American trade. Grain, lumber, and goods from the Midwest now flowed straight into Manhattan. the city's economy exploded. Bankers, merchants, and dock workers thrived. By mid-century, New York had become the entry point for millions of immigrants. The Irish fled famine, Italians escaped poverty, Jews sought refuge from persecution, and Germans chased opportunity. Later, waves of Chinese immigrants and freed African Americans also arrived. Each community added its own culture, food, and traditions, turning New York into a true melting pot. But life was not easy. Immigrants often crowded into tenements, cramped, dark apartments with little light or ventilation. Disease spread quickly, and child mortality was high. Yet, despite the hardship, hope remained alive. People believed that New York, with all its struggles, still offered a better future than the lands they had left behind. The flood of poverty also created crime. In the notorious neighborhood of Five Points, gangs ruled the streets. Violence, gambling, and prostitution turned the area into one of the most dangerous slums in the world. Writers and travelers described it as a hell on earth. Yet, it was also here that Irish dance mixed with African rhythms, giving birth to tap dancing. Proof that even in the darkest corners, culture thrived. Politics in 19th century New York was dominated by Tammany Hall, a powerful democratic machine. Led by bosses like William "Boss" Tweed, Tammany provided jobs and housing to immigrants, at the cost of loyalty and votes. Corruption ran deep, but it gave immigrants a political voice, however flawed. While immigrants struggled, Wall Street was rising. Banks, insurance companies, and stock exchanges turned New York into the financial capital of America. Deals made in Manhattan began to shape the entire nation's economy. The contrast between rich and poor became sharper, but together they made New York both a city of dreams and a city of shadows. By the end of the 19th century, New York was no longer just a city. It was a force, a place where immigrants built new lives, where politics thrived in corruption, and where finance reshaped the world. The stage was now set for the 20th century, when New York would rise higher than ever before. In 1886, a gift arrived from France that would forever change New York's image, the Statue of Liberty. Standing tall in the harbor, she welcomed millions of immigrants arriving through Ellis Island. For the tired, the poor, the desperate, she was hope carved in copper. For many, the first sight of America was not skyscrapers, but the lady with the torch. By the early 20th century, New York was racing upward. The Flatiron Building stunned the world, followed by the Chrysler Building and the Empire State Building, once the tallest building on Earth. These towers were more than architecture. They were symbols of ambition, strength, and the belief that in New York, the sky was the limit. But in 1929, the dream collapsed. The stock market crash plunged New York into the Great Depression. Banks closed, factories shut down, and bread lines stretched for blocks. Yet even in despair, the city endured. Musicians still played in Harlem, artists painted in Greenwich Village, and hope flickered in the darkest days. During World War II, New York's factories roared to life, producing ships, weapons, and supplies. After the war, the city became the home of peace. The United Nations headquarters opened in 1952 along the East River. New York was no longer just America's city, it was the world's city. The 20th century also brought cultural revolutions. In Harlem, the Renaissance gave birth to jazz, poetry, and black art that reshaped American culture. Broadway became the heart of theater. Museums, galleries, and media turned New York into the cultural capital of the world. By the late 20th century, New York had become a living symbol of modernity. Wall Street ruled global finance, while Times Square became the world's crossroads. But the city also battled crime waves, blackouts, and crises. Each time New York stumbled, but each time it stood up again. On September 11, 2001, the unthinkable happened. Terrorist attacks brought down the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. Nearly 3,000 lives were lost, and the city's skyline was forever changed. Yet, in grief and rubble, New Yorkers united. The spirit of resilience became the city's heartbeat. Today, New York is more than a city. It is an idea, a place of endless ambition, diversity, and resilience. From Wall Street's towers to Brooklyn's streets, from Broadway's lights to Central Park's quiet, New York continues to reinvent itself. The city that never sleeps is, and always will be, the world's greatest stage. 4 centuries ago, it was a wilderness. Today, it is the heartbeat of the world. This is New York, a city that rose from forests, fire, and tragedy, only to become eternal. The darkness of today's mystery may end here, but the questions it leaves behind will echo forever. In a world filled with secrets, only the brave dare to search for the truth. This was Mystery in the Dark, where shadows speak and history whispers. Until we meet again in the next mystery.